There are many positives about teaching and living abroad. The one is the adventure.
Hmm.
If you are an adventurous person, you should be doing this. If you're not an adventurous person, you should be doing this. It
Oh.
will actually push you. I mean, some people, they think they're adventurous, they get off that plane and they go, no thanks.
Hmm.
Other people think, I'm not adventurous, but this is a pretty pretty sweet setup that I have here, and I think maybe I can push myself out. And then they end up staying out for years.
Hmm.
I don't think you know until you know. It gave me teaching experience immediately.
Hmm.
Often the teaching experience wasn't easy. Often it was very difficult. And you learn to be flexible
Hmm.
when you're teaching overseas. You think you might be going into a system that you've been promised a certain position, and then you arrive and they say, actually, the teacher who just got off the plane that was going to teach junior kindergarten can't do junior kindergarten because she's freaking out. And hey, would you mind possibly stepping in
Hmm.
and taking on this role, even though you're a senior school social studies teacher? And you go,
Right. Hmm.
sure, right? The living, if you get in the right schools, you can make good money. Often your flights are covered to and from. You get often paid a fairly decent wage, tax free if you do your homework and you take a
Hmm.
look and make sure you cover all your basics before you leave. Um, Medical, there's opportunities to save. It allowed me to put a substantial amount of money down on my student loans by
Hmm.
living overseas. I could send over 70% of my income back home to be able to pay down my debt. So it worked in many ways. And it also exposed me to different ways of learning, different people around my nation, different people around the country in different countries. And being an outsider in another country is very humbling and very exciting. And you learn the art of teaching really quickly. You have to figure out that the ways in which you think are the right ways to do it and your systems and your culture
Hmm.
aren't necessarily the culture there. And you learn, it humbles you very quickly if you, especially if you allow it to. You develop relationships. I am still very much in touch with a handful of people. As
Hmm.
you grow, so do your friendships, I think. This is where being adventurous is important.
Hmm.
When you live abroad, it can be very lonely at times. You
Hmm.
go through those phases, right? Where it's like the honeymoon phase, and then
Yeah, the
like
homesickness.
there's like a scientific process, right? Then you
Hmm.
get homesickness, and then you get angry, and nothing is like at home. And
Hmm.
so if you're not adventurous or if you're not establishing good relationships with the people around you, you can get sucked into a vortex that can make the experience difficult. But if you're able to poke your head up above it and say, yeah, okay, I'm having a tough day today.
Hmm.
Or living here is difficult. And, living in Egypt in 2011 was not
No, we'll get to that in a minute.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
right? But the people are amazing
Hmm.
and the opportunities are there. You'll never get opportunities at home like you will get overseas.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know if this is particular to Egypt or not. I don't think it is actually, but there were a number of times where I'd be somewhere doing something, talking to somebody.
Hmm.
And for example, there was a going away party. So a colleague of mine had been there for 17 years. Her friends had been there for 17 years. She worked for the World Health Organization.
Hmm.
Her husband worked for Reuters. They were moving. So they threw a party. Well, they're in these two major organizations.
Hmm.
I'm at this party. Meanwhile, I'm sitting beside lawyers from the WHO, and I'm sitting with major journalists, and I'm thinking, how is a small town
How
girl
did I get here? Yeah.
sitting
Uh,
and having these conversations with these really interesting, cool people? If I had continued to live in Vernon, British Columbia, which I love as my hometown,
mhm.
I wouldn't have had these experiences. By virtue of being overseas and being part of an expat community, it enabled me to rub shoulders with people I would never have had that
Mhm.
opportunity to do. And by doing so, it starts broadening your worldview. You start seeing things differently. It's not about hoity-toityness and look who I'm walking with, but rather talking with these people, you start to have a different understanding of how the world works. You
Mhm.
start seeing how beautiful it is to be coming from a small town, but how isolated it is and how
Hmm.
the world is bigger and the problems are larger and the beauty is grander and the human identity is so much more rich than you ever realized, right? That's
Well
what I loved
said.
about living overseas.
Well said. That was really good.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I have my moments.
Weighing all the negatives and the positives. Is it worth it?
Yeah, hands down. And I can speak from my own experience. Okay, if you want to be a teacher that wants to just do the classic, get in the classroom, stay at the same school for your entire career, no. Because the public system, particularly in British Columbia, doesn't necessarily understand the value of an international teacher. And they have system, they have a union and there's all these steps. So the time away from putting in your union hours will delay your eventual continuing contract in your province. But if you're okay and you're willing to say, okay, I'll forego the safety and the comfort and the golden handcuffs of a union and a public pension to go and learn and be and do teaching from the get-go. Yes, 100 times yes. As an independent school teacher, it is the reason why I'm in my fellowship at the school that I'm at right now, right? It is because I have a breadth of experience. I have taught kindergarten, I've taught grade 1, I've taught grade 2, I've taught grade 4, I've taught science, I've taught math, I've taught socials, I've taught French. I teach economics, that's actually what I teach now. Political science, I teach philosophy, like I've taught everything. English, all of it, all grades. And because of that, I may not have the safety of a government pension and a union, but I have a resume that is clear that I am capable of doing anything. I am capable of stepping in when others step out, that I can grow with an institution and grow individually as a teacher, which means I don't get stagnant in my teaching practice.
Yes.
And as I work in these independent schools, they tend to be more international. So I have not a perfect amount, but I have some understanding that different cultures have different approaches to learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, besides the professional aspect of it, there is the experience and the relationships and the socialization outside of your own sort of cultural bubble and the expansion of your mentality and the expansion of your horizons and so forth, right?
Well, that's exactly it. And because I have taught in multiple different schools and in different countries, I'm someone who likes systems. I'm a systems thinker. I just a couple years ago completed my master's in leadership, and I approach things with different ideas because I have been exposed to them. I haven't been at the same school for 20 plus years. And so I'm not necessarily only understanding one way of doing things. So I can come in and say, have you thought about X, Y, or Z? And in addition to working overseas, is you are exposed not just to different leadership styles and different ideologies and different cultures, but as an educator, you're exposed to different systems of education. So I worked at a Manitoba school in Egypt, teaching Manitoba curriculum, but I became exposed to this concept of IB, International Baccalaureate.
Right.
And then when I came back to Canada, and so I knew that at the end of the day, I was looking for an IB school. And I came and worked in Canada in Victoria at an IB school, spent years teaching in the IB program, which has just honed my ability to teach even more because I was exposed to it. So many public school teachers don't even know what an IB school is. For good or for bad, they just don't.
Right.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, outweighs the negatives.
Okay.
100%. Adventure, excitement, friendships, relationships, growing as an academic, growing as a teacher, an educator, like especially in the 21st century, all we talk about in literature is about 21st century education. None of us know what that looks like.
Because we don't, it hasn't been, sort of established yet.
Right? We use 20th century models. We use 17th
We're
century
creating it now.
systems. Yeah. And so we're creating it now. And the best way to create it is a globalized world where you need globalized teachers.
Well said.
Thanks.
Nice.